Okay, so I'm going to go through the same process with the top, and this is a torrefied Sitka spruce top. So one little tip when you're gluing up the top is to offset the edge just slightly, so that way after you glue it, you can still find your center line on this board, which can be really hard to find once it's glued. Okay, now I'm going to rough cut the wood for the sides, and we're going to make that 36 inches by 5 inches. Okay, so I've had limited success with resawing such thick wood on my bandsaw, and so I'm just gonna saw use my table saw to cut those slices. All right, so much better success with the table saw. I'm gonna go ahead and cut the rest of these slices. I'm gonna get 4 slices because I'm gonna do double sides and glue them together. Okay, so I've got my 4 slices for my sides, and they're all sitting at about 140 thousandths of an inch right now. Some a little thinner, and so I'm going to run them through the drum sander to get them down to 45 thousandths of an inch, really thin. But again, I'm doing double sides on this guitar. Okay, so I've got these thickness down to 45 thousandths of an inch, and so they are finished. Okay, so next I'm gonna bend the sides on the guitar. I'm doing double sides, so I have 4 pieces here. These are gonna be the sides that are gonna be showing. You can see they're book matched. So first I'm gonna bend the inner sides basically. So the first thing I'm going to do, I've got all my stuff laid out here. I'm going to bend both of these at the same time. I'm going to wet them first. Okay, I'm going to put a mark here. I'd already looked at my other sides. I kind of put them on the bender, see where I want to bend at, and I'm going to put a mark there. I'm going to lay sides in, and I'm going to put the metal over them. Now this is just flashing that I bought at Home Depot. You can buy spring steel, but it's a little pricey, so I went with the cheaper route. And then we're going to put the heating blanket on here. You don't really want to put the heating blanket directly on your wood, because if there's any texture on your heating blanket, it could transfer to the wood. Take your little clamps, clamp it all together. Okay, so I've got my digital thermometer here. Just put that underneath the heating blanket. You want to try to keep it where it's not on the wood, because it could make an indentation. And then we'll plug our heating blanket in. Okay, so it's approaching, just hit 210. You want to keep it from going over about 300. Over about 300, you can start to scorch the wood. But it's about 225 now, so I should be able to start bending the wood slowly. You can see steam. Once you see steam starting to come out, you should be able to bend your wood. Okay, so the sides are bent, had a little bit of trouble. Number one, I'm an idiot. I should have clamped my jig down to begin with. Second thing is these springs, they're just not strong enough. And so as I was pulling those down, they weren't really applying enough pressure against the wood. And so I did get it down, but then obviously I had to kind of clamp them in place just to get enough pressure on them. And so I'm gonna let this sit for about 40 minutes and then take it out of the jig. All right. I know they didn't bend as much as I thought they should. Hopefully it'll go into the mold. We'll see. Okay, so I'm gonna actually bend these again. It did really well in the middle, but on this end, man, I'm really worried about trying to get it in the mold. I don't feel like it bent enough on the ends, especially this front end. So I'm gonna repeat the bending process, see if I can get these to stay bent a little better. Okay, so I'm rebending those sides, and I've had to modify this a bit. I don't think my spring tension is nearly stiff enough. So I'm just clamping it in place with these blocks here. I do have a video on how I built this, but I think that you could do some modifications by making these handles a little thicker, for sure. And so I'm gonna leave it on the heat. It's at 273, it should be good. Leave it on the heat about 5-10 minutes, and then take it off and let it sit for about 40 minutes. Okay, so I took these out of the mold, or out of the side bender. Much better success this time. I'm gonna make a couple of modifications to the side bender. They look pretty good. Once I put some pressure on them, they spring into shape into this mold. Okay, so these are book matched sides, okay? And so I'm sitting here looking at this, thinking about it. And so if I bend this one like this is how it's book matched, is like this. So this tight grain is facing towards me, and I'm pretty sure I have to stack it like this, where the tight grain is facing away from me. And that should work out correctly, hopefully. And I'm gonna wet it, both sides. Someone said if you use Windex is a wood softener. So I'll spray a little bit of that on there. I gotta make sure I got this oriented correctly. Okay, so I think this time will go a little smoother. I've got my jig clamped down. I'm wearing gloves. That helps also with the heat. Just kind of push that down a bit. I've got my larger sliding blocks here. I think that'll help. And what I'll do after it gets about 2:30 or so, we'll probably start seeing steam. Once we see steam, I'll start the bending. Okay, I'm starting to see some steam here. So I'm going to start in the middle. Okay, this has been at least 40 minutes. Oh yeah, these turned out a lot better. They look really good. The next step with the sides is gluing the sides, the double sides together. Until I'm ready to do that, I'll just store them in the jig just like this. Okay, next I'm gonna trace my outline onto my top and my back. Now I had offset my top slightly so I could still find my center line. So I am going to trace my center line out just so I can get my template. Okay, so we're gonna have to eventually cut out this circle here. So I need to find the center of this circle. So one trick you can use is you can take a tape measure, line it up on something easily divided by, and so I'm going that's a 3-inch line. So it's starting there, ending there. I'm going to draw a line, and at 1.5, I'm going to make a little mark. Okay, I'll do that again. Okay, 3 inches, and then at 1.5, do it again. And then I'm going to do it a 3rd time. Okay, then I have to take some sort of square. You can actually use a piece of paper. And so what you do is you line it up on a line and then your mark, and you draw, and then you draw along that square. Okay, and then you do it for the next one. And I can see where my center point already is without even doing this one. And accuracy does matter on this, so if you're off a little bit, then it will show. Okay, so my center point is right there. You can check that with one of these dudes here. Run it around, and that is about as close as I'm ever gonna get. Yep. I'm gonna go ahead and drill this hole in my top, and I use this jig right here, and we'll get going on that. It seems to work really well. So I did this step before thicknessing. That way, if there's any sort of like little burrs or whatever on the edges, the back looks really good. But and then that way, when I thickness this, it will take away any of those little imperfections. The next step is cutting out the back and sides. And after I cut them, then I'm going to thickness them. So when you cut it out, stay well outside the line, about a 1/2 inch outside the line. Okay, here's the back and the top. I had said side, sorry. Here's the back and the top cut out. The next step is to thickness both of these. So next I'm gonna thickness the back and the top. I'm gonna thickness the back down to 100,000ths of an inch. And one thing I'm gonna do is mark my center line on the edge there and on the edge here. So I know where to line up my template up at. Same thing here. I can even go to the sound hole on this. So I'm going to thickness the top. Randy said you want to thickness the top anywhere between 90 and 130. My last guitar, the top ended up being about 100,000th of an inch. So that's what I'm going to go to on this top. After thicknessing, because I had marked the edges with my center line, I'll carry them over to the top, and then I'll remark my center lines on these.